In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. In Peter's first sermon after the resurrection of Jesus, he talked about what had just happened that morning. The crowds were gathered for Pentecost, and suddenly the disciples were able to speak in foreign languages to the people who were from different nations around the Mediterranean. And Peter said that this was a sign of the coming of the Holy Spirit upon all the peoples of the earth, and that all of this was fulfillment of the prophecy of Joel. Joel had told his people, the Israelites, that the time of trial that they were going through, that it would soon come to an end, and that a time of spiritual flourishing would follow in its wake. And that anybody who called on the name of the Lord during the time of trial, that they would be saved. So this prophecy of Joel's can be applied apocalyptically. In fact, there's apocalyptic elements to it, but I want you to learn that apocalyptic prophecy has historical and present-day applications as much as it applies to the future. Joel and Peter's prophecies referred to what was happening in Joel's day, to the trial that his people were going through and the new day that was ahead. It had to do with the trial of Jesus and how that led to resurrection and the flourishing of the Spirit around the Mediterranean because of Pentecost. It has to do, friends, with every trial that you and I go through, and how we are strengthened and encouraged and emboldened and purified through those trials, and that when we get through them, we can be proud, and that our lives, in fact, will be fuller than ever before because of the growth that the trial has brought. It also, friends, does have to do with the future. It has to do with the eventual trial of each and every one of us as we walk through the final valley of the shadow of death. And it says to us that everyone who calls on the name of the Lord during that time will be saved. I thought about all those who died in our nursing homes and rehab centers and hospitals over the last year without anybody by their side, and how they wrestled consciously and subconsciously with the trial, the struggle that they were going through. And as they did so, that the spirit of mercy and love were powerfully upon their flesh. And that as they cried out for help, that the Lord was there to save them and shine light and peace upon them and bring them back to rest in their hospital beds and eternal rest in God's kingdom. I also believe that the collective trial that we're going through now is going to result in a period of great flourishing for humanity. Just as the trial of all humanity on the cross of Jesus, every one of us was tried with Jesus up on that cross. And that trial led to a period of great flourishing for all the peoples around the Mediterranean. You had Jew and Gentile. You had northern, quote-unquote, barbarians and southern, quote-unquote, heretical Samaritans. And you had masters and slaves all sitting together at one table and breaking bread together and being reconciled in a time of tremendous spiritual flourishing for all those who called on the name of the Lord. Those peoples who had been so divided and separated by sin, by national and religious barriers, suddenly were sitting together and helping to set one another free. Now, this took a lot of really hard work in the early church, as we see from another example of Peter at a lower point in his ministry. Peter had gone to visit the Gentile church in Antioch. And when he was there at first, he did break bread with the Gentiles and have fellowship with them. But then some of his brothers and maybe some sisters as well, Jewish brothers and sisters, came from Jerusalem. And when the next mealtime came, Peter separated himself with his Jewish brothers and sisters because the law said that you should not have table fellowship with Gentiles. And for this, Peter received a sharp rebuke from Paul. And Peter eventually came around, as did the early church. God is gradually bringing us around as well. The last year's trials of plague and protest, of peaceful resistance and violent rebellion, this is all going to lead to a new period of flourishing, spiritual and material flourishing, for humanity, at least certainly for those who are willing to break out of the old way of caring for and protecting and only trusting in me and mine, and break into the new way of Jesus, the way of welcoming and loving and caring for all, a way which breaks down racial, religious, political, and national boundaries in order that all peoples might share fellowship together and share the salvation of God together. I want you to think about how far we've come in just the last 70 years, following the horrors of 2 world wars in just 25, 30 years. In the 70 years, just 70 years, that's just a blip of time in human history. We've gone from racism being a norm in basically every nation of the world to it being understood rightly as the demonic power and principality that it is. The period of mourning that our world has been in over the last year is soon going to be turned into a time of dancing. And I saw a great example of that. There's a new dance craze that's going around. And it started off in South Africa, and it went northward to Angola. And you can watch the original dance that was done to the song online. The song is called Jerusalema. And when it made its way up to Switzerland, and there was a group of old, middle-aged and old Protestant Swiss clergy who decided that they needed to get in on the act and that they needed to publicize their own versions of the dance, then I knew that the Spirit was at work. I hope that you enjoyed the video, and then I'm going to conclude with some final charges.